In 2009, I really believe that's where work changed. I remember I had to find the self-motivation to be productive and to move myself forward and find some type of purpose.
From Washington, D.C., this is The Tightrope. I'm your host, Dan Smolen. Our mission on this podcast is to help you realize your dreams of doing meaningful work. Here you'll meet and be inspired by amazing people who overcame great odds. You'll discover what sparked them, how they explored work opportunities, the strategies that they employed to ensure career success, and the actions that they boldly took to make it all happen. You'll also meet esteemed and nationally recognized thought leaders who are helping people like you to develop work skill, experience, and leadership, and seize opportunity from a changing world so that your beautiful work dreams turn into reality. Together, let's turn work meaningful, for the future of work is meaningful work. Coming up, we meet Natalie Pryce of Pryceless Consulting. She helps sidelined professionals reconnect with meaningful work opportunities. But before we get to our interview with Natalie, we want to thank you for being a part of the Tightrope. We appreciate all that you do and continue to do to promote our podcast. Please point your friends who seek to do work that is profound, protects the planet, empowers people and communities, and is fun to do to our current and past episodes at dansmolen.com, or they may subscribe by keywording the Tightrope Podcast wherever they get podcasts. Our guest today is Natalie Pryce. She is a self-described introvert who struggled in school and knows firsthand what it's like to be downsized from a job. Yet Natalie never defined herself by her personality type or her past professional setbacks. Instead, she channels her own bravery to help vulnerable people, especially older out-of-work professionals, to find and do meaningful work. Natalie gets them grounded, focused, restored to self-confidence, and earning a paycheck at an astounding 90% placement rate. To discover her amazing life story and the success that she enjoys in helping people find and do meaningful work, we spoke with Natalie Pryce in November 2019 over Skype from her offices in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Natalie Pryce, welcome to the Tightrope.
Hi, Dan.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So the first question I want to ask is kind of a time travel question. When you were a kid growing up in Norwalk, Connecticut, when you were young, settling into bed after a day at school or play, what did you dream about being when you were all grown up?
I wanted to be a singer. I grew up with Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, and you know what? Lauryn Hill set it off. Lauryn Hill was when she was in Sister Act 2, she changed everything. And then the Fugees came out. I thought I was a singer when I was young.
Didn't she cover Roberta Flack, if I remember correctly?
Yes, she did. Yes, and it was Killing Me Softly, and I think it was Donna Summers. And yeah, it was definitely Lauryn Hill that inspired a lot in me.
Well, you picked some pretty bold role models there.
I know, right?
So when you were a kid, what aside from singing stoked your passions?
Well, I grew up in a neighborhood. I was a lot of boys, so I was playing outside a lot, and I think that's just the time period I grew up in. Mm-hmm. I was outside playing kickball, a lot of dodgeball, a lot of butts up. We had a street near my house, and it was just pretty much a hill, and you would go up the hill, take a skateboard, and just sit on it and just come down the hill. It's crazy now that I think about it. Mm-hmm. I would never do that now. But when I was a kid, I was very much outdoors, and video games. So, yes, I had Genesis, Nintendo. I liked all the games. I loved looking up the codes so I could advance to different levels. My brother and I, I'm the oldest of three, but at the time of my youth, that young age, I was the oldest of just my brother and I.
Uh-huh.
And we played video games a lot.
So you're learning to write code then? Do I have that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you could figure out, and we didn't have internet, so you had magazines, like game magazines that you would order, and they would have the different codes, and all you have to know is the combination of putting the codes in. It could be like A, B, B, C, D, B, B. It was just ways of advancing to different levels depending on what game you were playing. And I used to love being able to figure out the different codes.
So I'm trying to create a mental picture here. Young girl are playing with boys, developing a lot of grit, I would imagine, because if they treat you like another boy, you know how to deal with stuff, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was pretty tough.
And
I consider myself to be pretty tough at that age.
And then being smart enough to know how to manipulate the code of a video game. So what was going on? What was going on back then? What did you think you were headed?
I don't know. I think at that age, the truth is, I don't think I was thinking about academics. I don't think I was thinking about college. School was very hard for me. I stayed back in second grade, so school has always been a challenge. I remember even being put into a class that was for people that just needed a little bit more help in their schoolwork. And I was in a special class for that. And I just always found school to be difficult, at least the classroom aspect of school. And in the regards to education, I do think I was always a late bloomer, or I always needed a hands-on approach.
Well, you probably grew up. You and I talked in pre-interview. My mom and dad lived in Norwalk for the better part of 40 years. I got a little bit familiar with the school system there. I think back in the time when you were probably in school was probably a one-size-fits-all proposition, and I think it's changed. And now they would have seen a kid like you with a lot of gifts, and they would have figured lots of workarounds for you to help you thrive. The fact that you can look back at that time in second grade and say, look where I am now, is, hey, good on you.
Yep.
So you went to college, and when you were there, were you thinking about a professional future for yourself? And if so,
I was shocked that I was there.
Yeah.
I was shocked that I was there. When I was in high school, I remember I was my sophomore year, end of sophomore year, and I remember going to my guidance counselor and saying, I do want to go to college. Like, yeah, I think this is something I want to do. And she pretty much told me I wasn't college material.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I think that was the first time somebody said no to me, and I was like, screw you.
What did that feel like?
This. It was a lot because I had a lot to answer for. I come from a family that my parents didn't go to school here. My dad's from Jamaica, my mom's from England. That's different school systems, different ways that you learn. And so I think that was a gap that we just didn't have, that communication of how do we handle this, our daughter who is just not doing well in school, right? They're saying she has behavioral problems. They're saying this, she's saying that. Now knowing myself, I just have a lot of energy. And I didn't know how to direct energy, right?
Right.
I know how to direct energy now. I know how to reserve it, preserve it, and all that. But I think I just was a high energy kid that just needed hands-on activities to make simple assignments click.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that when I was growing up. So I did go to summer school 2 years in a row. I remember my 11th and 12th grade year, I was in summer school. I decided I did want to go to college, and by the saving grace, I met this teacher at Brian McMahon High School, and she is still there. Her name is Mrs. Leeds, and she was just like a grad student interning, and she walked me through my whole college process. And that is how I went to college and got into Central Connecticut State EOP program, which is a 5-week program. I got into that program and I kicked ass.
Really?
Yeah, because I had no other choice. So I knew what it, like, if I had nowhere else to go. When Central said yes, and they said, so I didn't get into any college up until like July because of my grades, right? So not July, like early June, I had nowhere. I was just going to Norwalk Community College at that point. Then all of a sudden I got a call from Central Connecticut State, the EOP program. Somebody dropped out. Whoever that was, thank you for opening up a door to opportunity for me, because that is how I went to college.
That is amazing.
And it was two weeks before we were supposed to leave for this big family vacation, and I couldn't go.
Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes you're an adult. You look back on events from your childhood and you go, "Wow, that happened. That pointed me to where I am now." That is just breathtaking. So you got through Central Connecticut.
Yes, I did.
And you graduated. What did you do next?
After I graduated from Central, I started to work. So I worked my first internship was at Pratt & Whitney in Middletown, Connecticut, Aircraft Road.
Sure.
And that is where I learned about airplane engines. And I did communications and did like take your child to work day activities. And I really got to exercise my event planning skills at that location, which from school, I was from Central Connecticut State. You know, before I graduated, I was president of clubs. I had run major budgets. So I just didn't go to school. I was very involved on my campus. And I really, really think that the best thing that I got out of my education is my soft skills.
Okay,
right?
So for people that don't know what I know what soft skills are. I spent 20 years in recruiting. It's what I leveraged every day on. Tell our audience what soft skills are.
It's the ability to communicate, the ability to motivate a team, work as a team, collaborate, manage people. It's all the things that come to us kind of naturally. And when we know that we have it, we can start to work at it. The ability to listen. Managing teams were really a big part of my soft skills. So if we have those skill sets, people want to work with us, and they'll teach us the hard skill stuff. You know, the soft skill stuff is really hard to find in people. So I really developed a lot of my soft skills at Central Connecticut State, how to build and maximize relationships and all that. When I graduated and I was working with Pratt & Whitney. That was another example of me being able to use those skills, because I had to be able to communicate with a lot of foreign dignitaries that would come to do tours of the factory and to see their next product that they're investing in. We had a lot of Asians coming over to see the aircraft, and understanding their culture was really important. So you have to be able to adapt to that. And it was a great experience. I really loved the challenges that were put before me at that internship.
You know, I had the experience early in my career of having to deal with people who were from Europe and from Asia. I'm a second-generation American. You're not. Your parents were from England and Jamaica. How do you think that might have advantaged you in dealing with foreign dignitaries?
I think they're just all, honestly, I think what really, really got me understanding culture in that sense was my sister, who is 14 years younger than me. She's the third of us. She was always very much culturally inept. Like, she speaks Mandarin. She studied abroad in China.
Wow.
And when she started to get really involved and interested in different cultures, the family got interested in different cultures. So we would have a lot of people coming and like study abroad from Asia and China coming over and staying with us. So we really understood the importance of knowing culture, right? So as you notice, I'm like really consciously understanding that Asia is a place, right? And in Asia, there's China, there's India, there's other countries, and being very aware of that. And when she started to get involved in her Center for International Studies courses, that made us interested in that. From that, we did take on a student, and she lived with us for like 6 months, and we love her. She is literally my sister from another mother, we call her. Her name is Tan Yu, and her parents now live over here, and every Christmas we all get together.
That's wonderful. What a great experience.
Her parents don't really speak English, so we have translators through our phone. We have full conversations. We watch movies. It's quite awesome.
Indeed. So, how long did your Pratt & Whitney experience last?
I was at Pratt & Whitney for about a year.
And what happened after that?
After Pratt & Whitney, work got very interesting, right?
Do tell.
After Pratt & Whitney, I got hired to work at Target, and I was a soft lines manager at Target. Target was a great experience. I was out of college, and I was managing people. Like, I had people older than me that I had to delegate responsibilities to and hold them accountable. So in the midst of working at Target, it was a lot, right? But now, in hindsight, Target taught me interviewing skills. It taught me how to manage a team, a big team, right? Because if you're in the store and you're the closing manager, you could be in charge of 50 people, right? And you're in charge and holding them accountable for the business needs of that day. So from very early in my career, I was put in a place of leadership at Target. The thing with Target, it was just not the lifestyle I wanted, right?
Long hours.
Oh my gosh! And it was the better of retail because you got every other weekend off, but you know your sleep pattern is off because you have to cover shifts if somebody is out. If the overnight manager is out, who's going to cover?
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Yeah, really don't have a life because of it.
It was a lot. It was a lot, but the skills I got from there, the soft skills of being able to manage people, manage fluid things. So what I mean by that is things happening all at once and being fluid in how you manage it. A complaining customer, the register is broken, the toilet's flooded, the bailer's not working, and 3 people called out.
Wow.
Right? So be fluid in managing. And it taught me how to really build and maximize relationships. And that's a phrase that I actually learned from Target. How do you build and maximize relationships? It's not how do you just request something that you want. How do you build a relationship so that you can maximize it in the end? And I really always liked that mind frame. So Target was an important part of the journey. But then I had to leave.
Sure. Where'd you go next?
It was a lot. After Target, I went to Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo in East Hartford. And I was a credit analyst there. It was a totally different type of work. But I was tired. I was like all I heard was Monday through Friday. Right? I was coming from a place where I was like, I can't do that. I just couldn't do it. So I went to Wells Fargo. Fargo taught me credit, right? It was right in the middle of the housing crisis.
Oh, good Lord.
It was right in the middle of the housing crisis. Like, I remember getting calls from people that they were almost 200% over the value of their home. It was just bad. It was bad. And just the level of debt. And that was and people were getting laid off left and right. And I was there for about maybe I want to say like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I got tired of that. I was like, you know what? I need something different. One thing I'm not afraid of
Mm-hmm.
is knowing when I need something different, right? When I need a challenge, a change, or I need a new direction. And I think people hold loyalty to the places they work way too much. And the places that you work don't always have the same loyalty to you.
I want to get back to that, say, red letter subject to talk about, and I hope to get back to that a little bit later on in this conversation. Like me, you, at some point in your career, suffered a layoff. Where'd that happen?
That happened when I moved back home. I got a job at a paper company, and I was there for a little bit, and that's where I had been laid off. And that was around 2009.
Ay, ay, ay. What a terrible time. Good
Yeah.
Lord. So what did that feel like to get laid off?
When I was laid off, it was a lot. It was a very, very difficult time and a place to be because I had realized I invested a lot of money into education, and I knew that I couldn't apply that education anywhere anymore. And I knew I was clearly in a state of depression, and I literally moved my bed to the living room, and I was like stuck on TNT. I would just watch TV, eating Oreos.
Ugh.
It was a lot because, you know, you're like, I went to school, you're supposed to get this job. And in 2009, I really believe that's where work changed. I remember I had to find the self-motivation to be productive and to move myself forward and find some type of purpose.
You know, in 2009, I obviously was recruiting then, and you just said work changed. And I've got bumps on the back of my neck now that are sitting up high because I'm in shivers. Yes, work changed in 2009. And none of us were really prepared for it. Recruiters, but more so people, talent. That was tough. That was really tough. So how'd you get off the couch and away from TNT and the Oreos? What did you do?
Well, I was always, in college, I was always a community person. I was a part of the NAACP. I was the president of the Black Student Union. I was always engaged in my local community. So by the time I was laid off, I had moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut in 2009. So this is May of 2009. I go through my little depression state for like a month until like July. And I decide I need to get up. So I literally just get up and go down to the city hall, to the small minority business office. And I meet this lady. Her name was Deborah Cavanis. And from that point is where pretty much the beginning of Pryceless started to happen.
Okay, so for our audience, tell them what Pryceless is.
Pryceless Consulting is my business. My persona when I'm in my business, I call her Pryceless. It's just a part of who I am. And I do remember when that light switch came on. I became that entrepreneur as I started to go through this layoff. And it's funny because I knew that I probably was not going to find work, but my mom was like, how did the job search go? How did the job search go? How did the job search go? And I would be like, it's good, it's good, it's good. But, you know, it was like you would get callbacks for jobs that what they wanted you to put in for what they were paying you wasn't even, it was just a smack in the face. There would be no way you could survive off of this. And then you're going to be burnt out in the mix of it. So you have even no energy to even be better for yourself if there's an opportunity for you.
So at that point, you said to yourself, I'm going to focus my entrepreneurial energies, and I'm going to do it in a place called Bridgeport. Let's back up a second. Why Bridgeport? Why did you move there from Norwalk?
The rent was cheap. That is like my honest answer. The rent was cheap when I moved here. I was like, yeah, I could live there. It was close to a train station. It had great transportation access. It had culture, right? So I knew that I could go to the bodega or compare or whatever store I needed and get food that I was familiar with because I'm Jamaican. There was Jamaican restaurants there. So it felt like a home.
So, Pryceless Consulting, tell our audience what you do for people.
I am a business and career coach, and I work with people on getting back on track with finding themselves in their brand as they move through their career or their business profession. And when I say brand, I'm not speaking about your logo, your colors, all that. It's really identifying what are your hard skills, what are your soft skills, what are your transferable skills, and together, when we put those together, what's the value proposition that you give to your segmented audience? So it's a different way of thinking of yourself as an entity. The best way that I love to explain it is when I'm doing my coaching courses, we often start off with a brand statement. And that brand statement, the first place I want you to put it is on your LinkedIn page. And I want you to put it in your headline, and I want you to start claiming the power of what you want to be. And I also want you to be comfortable in knowing that your brand can change, right? And people get lost in thinking that they have to be one thing forever. And I always go back and forth and I say, well, Pepsi and Coca-Cola are always switching out their look, their feel, everything. They're always trying different things. They've been successful. The quality may stay the same or be better, but the brand can change. And that's what I want people to get comfortable with.
So you adopted something that I'm familiar with, having come out of advertising, and that is that successful brands reinvent themselves every 7 years or sooner, because if they don't, they die.
Yes. And people, and the irony that I find when I'm doing my courses and I'm working with workshops is that I often say to people, so you don't scrimmage before you apply for a job. And what I mean by that, or you start your career, like start looking for work. When we are playing any kind of sport, we always have the real game and a scrimmage and a practice, and we do 2-a-days and we do that. But when we need to practice for our life, for the daily, for the food that we put on our table, the money, our benefits, all that is tied to work. You mean we don't practice? We don't think it's important to interview or to know what's on your resume and being able to write that resume or cover letter? We don't think it's important to do research on companies. We need to practice, just like we do for everything else.
So my parents' generation probably believed that as part of their American dream, they could align themselves with one company over the arc of their careers and then get the golden parachute and then retire. I mean, I think probably during the 1950s and probably through most of the 1960s, that happened a lot. My generation, not so much. I've had so many career pivots. My daughter, who is 18 and in college, is probably going to have lots of career pivots.
At least 12.
That's amazing.
At least 12, right? So you're going to need to know how to swing like back and forth to different opportunities, kind of like rock climbing, right? Work will not be a ladder. It's not going to be a continuous straight up the ladder. You have to continuously re-educate yourself. So we have to rethink how we educate, right? And where we educate. That's going to be a very important. I kind of get nervous.
Why so?
I kind of get nervous. So I get nervous because I understand that we are working with a lot of K-12 initiatives, but I know that there's an immediate generation that needs help now. And if we decide to look at this as a whole United States thing, we are in a global race for innovation. And if we do not prepare, and we can't wait for kids to graduate high school and college, we need that work now. And it's great because I'm really looking at like the New Deal and when it was written, and in the time it was written during a crisis during the early 20th century. We were going through the Great Depression. The economy was at a halt. So we needed to do something to pump the economy, get it going again. So we did the New Deal, came out in phases. And the first phase was allowed federal dollars to come into communities like Bridgeport,
right,
and fund certain projects. and people were able to get work off of that. And
Right.
if you were a skilled worker, you got paid $1.20, and if you were unskilled, you got 50 cents. People came from all over the country to Bridgeport to be able to get work just because of that New Deal. The New Deal funded trainings. It even funded some housing initiatives so that people can start owning property to drive taxes in certain areas. We need a better deal. And
Right.
we need to do it over and we need a better deal.
Bridgeport has a lot of different people, young and old, wealthy and not, advantaged and not. You had said to me that you tend to work with a portion of the workforce that's more seasoned than not, so maybe in their 50s. And
Yeah.
I also learned in my research that you have a really good success record of getting them from their point of despair to perhaps even a new job. Like 9 out of 10 of them, you get to a better place. So
Oh, yeah.
my question to you is, Natalie Pryce, how do you do that?
I remind them of themselves. I think sometimes in work, we have been taught to be the titles that we're given at work, and we totally forget that we are so much more important than that outside of those walls, and that we have people that love us outside of those walls. When we bring value to our community, we bring value to our homes. So my goal is always trying to remind you that outside of what you do at work, you are a person of relevance. And the reason why that's important, because you're going to have more situations where you get laid off. And
Right.
we need you to build the confidence to know that this is just a situation, and I have the tools I need to move through this situation. And it's okay if I feel a little bad, because I'm human, but I have to be able to move forward. So I very much I talk human to, like, I use the concept of being a human is being upset sometimes about something that's going our way, but also we need to be able to move forward. That's really a lot of what I really want people to know their value.
You know, having done recruiting for 20 years, I often found that the biggest challenges were people who had the most experience, who were perhaps the most seasoned, for a lot of reasons. One is if they've been in the same company a long time, they get kind of lulled. Their soft skills don't pick up on change within the organization that might have told them 18 months before they got fired, hey, you know what? Maybe you need to pivot.
Yes. They do not see that stuff, right? And in my courses, that's my job. My job is moving forward. I need you to be more vigilant. I need you to play this game differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even down to the point of, I used to ask people, like, did you work 9 to 5 or did you stay late? And people would be like, I stayed late because I wanted my boss to think I was working. And I'm like, well, why didn't you just produce the work within the time that you needed to do it? So it's like even changing their attitude on how they work, and making sure that they present something that is of value, knowing their value, and knowing your values, knowing your hard skills and your soft skills, and knowing how they work together to create the perfect mix of those transferable skills, and knowing when to say, for each role that I'm looking at, I'm going to create a secret sauce mixing all those skills together that applies to that role.
So coming out of the age group that you impact the most, I'm in my late 50s. I will tell you that during my early career, there was an unspoken rule that the longer you worked, the more you would be rewarded. That job that I worked at in Greenwich, I often worked between 60 and 80 hours a week. Did I get rewarded for it? I got rewarded. I did very well. I had, a great office. I was a young guy with a lot of responsibility. Natalie, it made me sick. It made me physically ill and mentally rattled, to the point where when I did get laid off, I felt as if I was at my own funeral, because all those things I was told to do, to be buttoned up, to not let anything bother you, to work harder than the next person, kind of worked against me. I used that experience with my talent to say, well, was it worth it? No. We got to think of new ways of getting you through the work experience so that you are joyful.
Exactly.
But that work isn't making you sick and making your loved ones crazy and your neighbors and your coworkers, because you know what? I would think that a lot of people that you work with, they've gotten to that point of toxicity. And oh, by the way, they've had the monetary benefits of the work, but now they are loaded down with stuff and often with debt, so that when they do get laid off, oh, it's not pretty.
It is. And that's the difference. So like me being laid off was a completely different rebound than them, right? Because I didn't have a house and cars and kids and colleges to pay for. I didn't have any of that. But the people that I work with, my magic question is, how many working years do you have? And if you don't know how to answer that question, let me help you. Do you have years left on your mortgage that you need to pay? Do you have kids that still need to go to college? Do you have debt that still needs to be managed? So you need to know before you even start looking at work. Okay, I have about 15 years of working years that I need, no matter what my age is.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know that people are keeping jobs 3 to 5 years, that's 4 jobs. And that's you just being realistic with it. So now how do we create that pathway or be strategic? I call it like a strategy. How do we become strategic in planning these next 4 jobs? Whether it's I'd love to work for this company, then I'm going to do some really strong networking. People don't have a strategy of how they're going to do the next, and that's what I try to instill in my clients.
Another layer of awfulness, and you mentioned 2009, the Great Recession. I remember at the end of 2007, because, recruiters are like canaries in the coal mine. We're the first ones to feel the pain when suddenly the work requisitions roll up. And in December of 2007, I had a bunch of open recs, more work than I could handle. And then in the space of 2 weeks, it got cut down by 80%. Because companies on the front line were suddenly saying, uh-oh, we're in trouble. So how that affects the workforce is that it puts unrealistic demands on hiring managers to find perfection that they don't have to train, that they don't have to overly invest training in. And so I would often have to find people that met unrealistic expectations. And guess what happens when you did that? Yeah, you place some people, but they probably burned out or flamed out after a year. Because they weren't hired for being talent. They were hired for being human capital that immediately provided a benefit that the company back in the Great Recession didn't want to invest their cash reserves in. And you know what? Throughout the 2010s, it didn't really change very much. Now we got a situation with millennials basically being the majority of the workforce, Generation Z or whatever they're calling it, the plurals coming in after. And I think that those generations are changing what it means to work. One, because they are the majority of the workforce. What do you think about them? Do you see positive impacts in how in what happens to work as a result of these new generations kind of taking over?
Yeah, I think we have to be very aware of what they do, right? So I'm going to give you a great example. In my class, the first thing that I tell everybody to do is we're changing over to Gmail accounts. The reason why we're using Gmail is because most universities are using Gmail accounts. So I know that future executives and future, they're going to be making the decisions in these companies. They're going to be using Gmail accounts. So why would you set yourself up to look outdated?
You mean as opposed to an AOL account?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not even that too. If you know that this is what's being used, why not get a head start of knowing how to use it, right? So then when you get into these offices and they're like, okay, here goes your company email account, and you realize, oh my God, this is the same thing like Gmail, because it's an enterprise account from Gmail, right? So we have to start using the tools and technology that's being used by them. There's a reason, right? I still believe in diversity of age in the workplace. I think it's important. One of the things I personally love working with my age group. They're so smart. They're so smart. They have life experience. They know how to manage people. We can talk about different things. They've just forgotten their value because we were taught not to take tabs on all the great things we do.
How do we change it?
I think ageism. I think age is an energy. I could say that there's reverse ageism. You know, I'm almost 40 years old and I don't look it, and I know I lose opportunities or get paid less. Right? I can't control that. Right? So I won't allow that to be an excuse. So what we do is we do the things to change the energy of what we're putting out. You cannot put your picture from 1970 on LinkedIn because it makes you look younger, right? First of all, the picture just looks old, right? So like you can't do that. You have to be honest. And I work with a very diverse group, and I'm a millennial, and I work with a very diverse group of ages, right? And what makes those relationships really work well is that we respect each other as just people. Nobody's trying to be my mom. I hate when older people try to do that, right? They try to parent younger millennials. They don't need you to parent them. They already have parents. And I'm sorry if they're rude. They don't need you to parent them on their rudeness. If you find a millennial who's rude, you check them like how you would check an adult. Because at that point, that's what they are. But like sometimes I find that older people treat millennials like kids. Like they're kids.
You know what? There's a historical reason for that. I think a lot of organizations, sometimes hiring managers narcissistically hire themselves. They hire people. They go find me somebody who, and then I would look at the rec and I would say, well, you want an Ivy League person? You're from an Ivy League background. You want somebody with this skill set? You have that skill set. If your organization is in trouble, why do you want to hire more of you? Maybe you have to do the opposite. Hire less of you. Hire somebody who has a completely different point of view, a different skill set, a different age point of view, a different cultural point of view.
I do think so, but I also think that more companies are going to have to invest in professional development of their employees.
Yes.
They're going to have to invest because if all companies just say, you know what, I want to make sure that my employees are trained, that they're best that they can be. If everybody thought like that, then we would just have an ecosystem of well-trained people leaving companies and going to another company. But if we don't think like that, then we're just hoarding, and not just hoarding, but preventing people from growing. Because just because company A has opportunities, there may not be opportunities for me to grow within this company. And company B may have those opportunities. So employers also have to start thinking about, how do I make sure that the workforce is healthy, is emotionally stable? Those are important, because if they're not emotionally stable and they're not healthy, we don't have a workforce.
If you're a company that has to respond quickly, then the best you could ask for from your talent is that their evergreen skills are sharp.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Strong math, strong science, strong artistic skills, and good interpersonal skills. I mean, those things are evergreen. You should know how to relate to people. You should also know how to exercise good emotional intelligence in a room full of diverse people, because everybody's got their own point of view. But
you should, but people don't. That's another one.
But within the company, what they can do is respond to the emergent challenge and train and empower their people based on what's happening in real time. No school, no university can do that, but the company can do it.
with University of Bridgeport, which I do a lot of work with because I sit on the board, even them being able to say, okay, we need certification, right? You already have a degree, things you need to brush up on something. We need certification. How quick can we roll out certification? Even to say, if we have, there's people that just want more information. Schools are competing with edX.org, Udemy, Lynda, all of these self-paced education sites that you can go on and stack up on certifications. If universities don't meet that, that's a problem.
You know, down here in the D.C. area, especially in Northern Virginia, we have a high-tech economy. 10% of our workforce is high-tech trained. That said, we now have a completely new legislature that has a different point of view. And one of the things that they are going to be working on is the advent of clean energy, offshore wind, solar, geothermal, and bringing Virginia into the 21st century. And in order to do that, even smart people need to be certified in those technologies.
Yeah.
The leader in that, or one of the leaders in that, is going to be Virginia's community college system. They're going to earn their stripes by helping to, because it's efficient. They're built for speed, is to help the workforce get the training they need efficiently so that Virginia can respond to the challenges of understanding all these new technologies. And it's just not just these new technologies. How about the old technologies? How do you help somebody get out of a, let's say, working in a power plant where you're managing legacy technology, and the technology is used to burn coal or burn natural gas or something that's becoming outdated? This is where the University of Bridgeport, this is where community colleges throughout the country are going to be responding, I think.
I totally agree. And I actually when I'm writing up a report, and I said that higher education, both university and colleges, should actually start playing the role of a community knowledge audit. So, like, how do we start keeping track of our informal and formal knowledge base? And that becomes data that we can use for companies. You know, companies are looking to move into Bridgeport. We can show, here is our innate talent that you don't see because they may not always be degrees, right?
Yes.
When you're in a community that's full of immigrants and it's diverse like that, you get a lot of different community knowledge that comes that's never really documented as education or certifications of anything.
I think that's an opportunity right there.
And I think that's a role community colleges can play, and they partner with community-based organizations. We underestimate the role that those community or faith-based organizations play in our communities. They are the trust between programs and the people. So if the universities start rolling out programs for, like, how do we start retaining this community knowledge, you got to partner with organizations that the communities trust.
So I have one last question for you, Natalie, and it's sort of a crystal ball question to gaze into the future, 10 or 20 years. What do you think will happen, but what is also your hope for the community where you live from a talent standpoint? What things do you think will happen to make work more meaningful? What are things that you hope will happen in Bridgeport and in Southern Connecticut to make work more meaningful?
Well, I think what we'll start to see is a lot more civic engagement in all levels. I think that we have to understand that with Bridgeport, from even the early 20th century, there's just been so much that's happened here. Good, bad. It's just been a lot. And I often compare our city to, I hate to say it, but it gives it some understanding, kind of like an abuse victim. And, right, like, it's had companies come here, move, it's been polluted on. We have a lot of land that still needs to be, taken care of that we can't build on. Our school system is not is not good at all.
Yeah.
We have so many opportunities. And I think sometimes when a community has been hurt so much, it doesn't know how to make good decisions. Like, you just lose the ability to be able to make a good system because the ecosystem is hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Bridgeport, in some respect, is a hurt ecosystem. However, I do think Bridgeport is a very proud ecosystem. One thing with Bridgeporters is they love their city, good or bad. It is an amazing place. And I think that as we move forward into the future, we're going to see a lot of the highlights of Bridgeport come to light. We have access to over 20 miles of water. So we have ocean view access. We have beautiful beaches and access to 2 places where we can sit and look at the water, St. Mary's by the sea, and then we have Seaside Park, which is a beautiful park. We have a zoo, and we are the transportation hub. So I think that in the years to come, the value that Bridgeport plays to the surrounding communities is going to speak volumes, especially as we see the growth of cities. That is something that's taking place as an emerging condition throughout the country, right?
Right.
So I see Bridgeport eventually shining. It has some work to do on itself, and I think the problems of Bridgeport are not just Bridgeport issues. I think as a state we have work to do, and as we can see as a country we have work to do. And I'm proud to have landed here. And my little inside joke with myself is that I was born in Norwalk, but I was made in Bridgeport.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's great.
Yep.
Natalie Pryce, thank you so much. If somebody wanted to learn more about you on social media, where would you point them?
I would point you to my LinkedIn page, Natalie Pryce. On LinkedIn, I would definitely point you there. My website, prycelessconsulting.com, and that's PRYCELESS Consulting.
Thank you so much for walking the tightrope.
Thank you very much, Dan, for having me. You have a wonderful day.
Our thanks go out to Natalie Pryce of Pryceless Consulting for walking the tightrope with us. Links to her social media are included in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at dansmolen.com. On the tightrope, our success is your success, but we cannot build our community without your help and support. So please ask 5 of your friends to check out our podcast. Point them to current and past episodes on our website at dansmolen.com, or they may subscribe by keywording the Tightrope Podcast wherever they get podcasts. And if you haven't done so already, please join the Dan Smolen Experience to get our newsletter offering information, tips, and hacks to help you to succeed in doing meaningful work. To sign up, simply click the Subscribe to the Dan Smolen Experience newsletter button on our homepage at dansmolen.com. Fill out the short form, then click the subscribe button at the bottom of the page, and you'll be on your way. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can locate our social media buttons at the upper right-hand corner of our web pages. From Washington, D.C., this is The Tightrope. I'm your host, Dan Smolen, and do remember this: our best days lie ahead. Have a great and successful week, everyone.